While writing appears on a variety of materials from ancient Mesoamerica, their most intricate and colorful expressions appear in the codices. Hello! This episode of the Native American Writing Systems playlist will remark on the content of these enigmatic works, and then focus on how they were read and what they were used for. As explored in another Eye of the Serpent video, ancient Mesoamerica had three major codex traditions, each with its own major theme. Calendar rituals among the central Mexican highlands, Mixtec myth and history in the Oaxaca region, and Maya astronomy from Mexico to Central America. Following the previous episodes in this playlist, this installment will continue looking into the picture writing traditions of central Mexico and Oaxaca, as the codices expressed them. The art styles in these two regions overlapped so strongly that they have often been grouped into a single tradition called Mixteca Puebla, and this is the area that the present episode will explore. The Maya script is for another video ahead in this playlist. If you are new to the codices of Mesoamerica, here are a few notes on their make and purpose. Much like a book, they contain a diversity of text organized around a main theme. The primary material is stretched deerskin or tree bark pulp worked into a single long strip, then folded into plates of equal length for a pleated effect. A light gesso plaster on each side provides a firm surface for the application of paint. Texts were composed on both sides of a codex. It could then be opened to a set of plates to review all the related content in a single reading. The oldest codices are dated to the post-classic period, from the 10th century AD to the Spanish conquests of the 16th century. Scholars estimate that priests of the old civilizations may have kept hundreds of such works at their temples. Unfortunately, because the codices were so often tied to Native American religions, Spanish colonists believed that they were instruments for devil worship, and they destroyed the codices almost entirely, many in notorious book burnings. A few have survived from the three culture regions mentioned in this video: 5 from central Mexico, 7 from Oaxaca, and 4 from Maya land. Historians found that 2 of the Oaxaca manuscripts actually belonged to the same codex, the Columbinus kept in Mexico, and the Becker I in Vienna. This episode will look at sample texts from the former fragment. The Codex Borgia is arguably the most extensively documented of the Central Mexican group for not only the diversity of subjects, but also the quality of the painting itself. It is neither the best preserved nor the largest in the group, but its vibrant depictions of mythical and ritual scenes have made it an icon of pre-Columbian native art. Practically every page of the Codex Borgia has some reference to the 260-day sacred calendar, whose sequence followed the intersection of a numeric count from 1 to 13 and a symbol count of 20 distinct days, each associated with a complex of sacred and metaphysical associations. If you would like to learn more about the sacred Mesoamerican calendar, the Eye of the Serpent channel has a whole playlist on the topic. Entire sections of the Codex Borgia depict the organization of these 20 days by time, space, and even embodiment per certain gods. This manuscript guided ritual performance and religious instruction. Major sections group sets of days with supernatural, mythical, and symbolic events, such as among the very beginning of the Codex. Other parts prescribe the rites to be enacted for specific periods. An important section in the Codex Borgia is near its middle, where a series of elaborate temples and other ritual spaces appear. The main character, a priest with a tufted headdress and a large stripe crossing down his eye, first appears in the ball court at lower right. The narrative itself begins with a presentation of a netted bundle in the temple at right. From the temple entrance, a procession follows a solid blue path, its footprints marking direction. This group progresses into the next plate, and the stripe priest takes the ritual bundle to a place of power at the center of the scene. There he opens it, releasing a burst of the winds it had contained within. Streaming bodies and the wind god mask identify the beings as wind spirits, which carry him out of the space and along the current at the plate's boundary. This stream of black winds crosses the edge of the next plate until it opens at the corner of the following one. This event could suggest mystical flight, a common shamanic experience. The stripe priest emerges from the wind mouth and arrives into a new complex of ritual enclosures and supernatural beings. A narrator would have read the images to recite the account in eloquent, poetic speech, perhaps even as a ceremonial troupe dramatized it in costume. The Codex Borgia is an encyclopedia of Central Mexican beliefs and practices around the sacred calendar. As it was 6 centuries ago, the Codex Borgia remains today an invaluable tool for teaching culture. And since 1999, I have had my own copy of the Codex Borgia, which is a reproduction from the original codex that was painted by hand to replicate the original sketches and colors as they may have appeared back in the 15th century. And this is an admirable work. I even use this for my own consultation for my own daily practices when I need to. And I also use this as a textbook when I taught the Mesoamerica course at the undergraduate level during the late 2000s, seeing that stack of the Codex Borgia available for students so that just like the priests from the 15th and 16th centuries and using the Codex to instruct on matters of Mesoamerican culture, religion, the calendar, and so on, I too could participate in a very old tradition, and it was one of the proudest accomplishments of my former teaching career. The Codex tradition is arguably the most extensively studied art form in Mixtec civilization because of its wealth of history on the Mixtec dynasties. In fact, as John Pohl has remarked, the historical accounts of the Mixtec kings and queens recount generations as far back as the 10th century. They comprise the longest continuous dynastic chronicle in Mesoamerica, perhaps even of any Native American culture. Formerly called the Vienna Codex, the Yuta-Tnoho exemplifies the Mesoamerican literary tradition of telling an epic with mythical beginnings, legendary feats, and finally historical events. The first side of the manuscript describes the creation of the world and civilization, and one of its key figures is the god named after the calendar sign Nine Wind. His mask, creativity, and other attributes relate him with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god known across Mesoamerica. In this scene, the deity follows a rope descending from the heavens. The second side of the Codex Yuta-Tnoho presents the history of the noble lords and ladies descended from the creator gods. Mixtec gods and kings alike were named after specific combinations of number and sign, from the cycle of the sacred calendar. We can identify, for example, the gods Seven Earthquake and Nine Wind. And among the nobility are Lord Two Rain and Lady Six Monkey, each named after their birthday. John Pohl likens Mixtec history to a lineage corridor, twined from several major royal lineages from political centers in the northwestern Oaxaca highlands. Artists must have created these historical texts at different sites, for each one roots for different families, and others are sometimes omitted. What they all share, however, is the introduction of a newcomer named 8D, who would change the social landscape of the Mixtec region by the turn of the 12th century. This man had no noble birthright among these Mixtec families, unlike the other kings and queens whose lineages could be traced to the creator gods themselves. As a challenger to the old nobility, 8D would use military conquest, political assassination, noble marriage, and even a nose piercing as claims to the right to rule. These campaigns established the king as founder to a new dynasty in a reordered Mixtec world. The Codices celebrated the extraordinary feats of 8D and his descendants, bringing order and leadership to the Mixtec lands after a previous age of turmoil. Conventional thinking on these texts has noted how rulers would have consulted them on matters of conquest, alliance, and succession to inform political decisions. Also, an account by Francisco de Borgoa from the 17th century tells how a single codex could be unfolded and mounted to run along the wall of a royal palace, for the king to show his long heritage off to visitors. And new evidence supports the idea that a reciter read the codex accounts to narrate their reenactments. Red borders define a winding path, suggesting a rhythmic procession that could have been translated into the cadence of song and dance. From the Yuta-Tnoho and other codices, Mark King points out hints of grammar markings distinct to esoteric forms in Mixtec ritual language, which could have also been spoken or even sung. The images in the Mixtec texts support the idea that most Mesoamerican codices were not read in silent privacy, but rather for ceremonial spectacle. The next episode in the Native American Writing System series will look at the glyphs of southern Mexico, from the earliest expressions among the Olmec to a fully formed script by the Zapotec. Join us for the following installment.